All right, good morning, Rainy Math students. This is Mr. Gutierrez, and in today's video, I will be going over the Module 7 review. Remember that the test is this Friday. There will not be notes allowed or the review allowed for it since it is going to be a unit test. It's right before spring break. So make sure you watch this video multiple times in case you have any questions on any of the problems that I'm going to be going over. So without further ado, here's question number 1. It says, which of the following pairs of angles represents alternate exterior angles? This is the key word, exterior. Exterior means that it's on the outside, so anything on the inside cannot be the answer. So anything with a 5, a 6, a 4, or a 3. A 5, a 6, a 4, or a 3. Notice, I just canceled out the 5s, the 6s, and the 3s. The only question that is left is letter D, and this one includes numbers 1 and 8. 1 and 8 are on the outside, and more importantly, they are alternating because one's on the left, the other one's on the right, so the answer to number 1 is letter D. Boom. Okay, so for number 2, there's a lot of different ways of answering this. This is the way I would do it, completely up to you, whether you want to follow this method or do your own. It says in the figure, line C is parallel to line D. Both of these lines are cut by a transversal. If the measure of angle 12 is 60, so let me locate 60, here's 60 here. It says, and the measure of angle 14 is 80, so this one is 80 here. They want to know what is the measure of 3 and 6. So we are looking at 3 over here, 6 over here. Okay? So what I like to do, and again, this is my own personal way of doing it, right, is I like to do the bottom angles first. And again, that's just me. Everyone's different. I'm sure Mr. Rogers would argue that I'm going to do way too much work here, but that's on me, right? 80 plus 60 makes 140. So 80 plus 60 makes 140. A straight line will always give you 180. So that means that this one is 40. Because 180 take away 40 gives you the 40, right? And then what we have what they call vertical angles. So 14 and 11 are congruent. That means this one's 80. 13 and 10 are congruent, which means this one's a 40. And then this one's a 60. Okay, so that's step 1, right? Now, if you look at angle number 6 and angle number 14, right? And I'll highlight this in blue, okay? This angle and this angle is what we call corresponding angles. Corresponding angles are congruent, so if angle 14 is 80 degrees, then automatically angle 6 also has to be 80 degrees. Okay, so over here, angle 6 is 80 degrees. Okay, and then we know that two angles next to each other on a straight line make 180. So in order to find the measurement of angle 3, we just simply do 180, take away 80. So that means that the measurement of angle 3 gives you 100 degrees. For number 3, they want you to match the terms to the diagrams or the pictures. So it says alternate exterior angles. Exterior angles means that they have to be two angles on the outside. Okay, so when I look at this can only work when you have a set of parallel lines cut by a transversal. So in this case, the only one that can be that is letter B. And this one down here, I'm just going to put alternate, ALT, exterior, EXT, and then angles. So that's the first one. So I'm done with that first one. The second one is called vertical angles. Vertical angles are angles that are non-adjacent to each other. They're angles that are across from each other. So when I look at this, I'm left with A and C. And the ones directly across from each other that are non-adjacent is going to be letter C. So this one we're going to call vertical angles, which means that the only one we have left are supplementary angles. And in case you need to go back and look on your notes, supplementary angles are angles that are adjacent, which means right next to each other, that add up to 180 degrees. For number 4, it says when a basketball hits a hard level surface, it bounces off the floor at the same angle at which it hits the floor as shown. What is the measure of x, which is the angle at which the ball hits the floor and bounces? Okay, so remember a straight line, which is this one down here, makes 180 degrees. So if we do 180 take away 70, we are left with 110 degrees. Now, both of these angles are congruent because in the question it says it comes off at the same angle as where it bounces, right? So all I need to do is take 110 and cut it in half because we have two angles that add up to make 110 degrees. So in this case, we get 55. So this side is 55, this side is 55, and if you add all three of those angles, it should add up to 180, which it does. So my answer here is x is 55 degrees. For number 5, remember that all interior angles of a triangle, okay, add up to 180 degrees. So this whole thing has to be 180 degrees here. Alright, so if we know that a triangle adds up to 180, then all we need to do for question number 5 is add 56 plus 63. This gives us 119. So that means that the value of x has to be 180 take away 119. And in this case, the only answer that could be is going to be B, as in boy. So that's my answer for number 5. For number 6, there's a theorem that we talked about in our notes for 7-3, if I'm not mistaken, and it's called the exterior sum angle theorem, right? So basically what it means is if the exterior angle is 142, the sum of the interior angles, right, that is non-adjacent, have to add up to 142 as well. So all we need to do for this one, very easily, you take 142, you subtract it by one of the angles that's given, which in this case is 75. I regroup, this gives me a 7, 13 take away 7 gives me a 67. So that means that the missing angle measure is 67 degrees, because if you add the 67 plus the 75, it should give you 142 degrees. Alright, and then for number 7, they want you to find two values. They want you to find h and k. So I'm going to write over here h equals, k equals, right? And again, I'm going to go ahead and circle the h and the k, which are the two angles that they want us to find, right? So let's start with the h, right? So the h, the outside number is 131. That's called an exterior angle. So that means the sum of the interior angles, which is the 14 and the h, those must add up to 131. So off to the side, I'm simply going to do 131 degrees, take away the only angle that they give me, which is 14 degrees. I regroup. This gives me a 7, this gives me a 1, this gives me a 1. So that means that the measurement for angle H is simply going to be 117 degrees. Okay? So we're done with that first one. And then for K, the same exact thing, right? So this simply tells me, and let me erase this part so that way you can see, right? This tells me that if the outside angle is 125, then J and K have to add up to 125. Now some of you guys are asking, well, how do you do that? Because you don't have the J or the K. So remember that any straight line adds up to 180. If this side is 130, you simply do 131. My apologies. If I subtract these and I regroup, right, this side gives me 49 degrees, right? Now we're going to need one of the sides because remember 49 plus the other number has to equal 125 because it's the sum of the interior angles that is equal to the exterior angle. So then all I need to do here is I need to take 125 degrees, subtract it minus the 49 degrees. I need to regroup. This becomes 11. This becomes a 15. 15 take away 9 gives you 6. 11 take away 4 gives you a 7, right? So that means that angle K is going to be a 76 degrees, and that's how you would do that one. For number 8, it says in triangle RST, the measure of the angles RS and T respectively are in the ratio 2, 4 to 9. Right? So if I draw and I put angle R, S, T, the R, we don't know what it is, but we know that the ratio is a 2 to 4 to 9. So I'm going to put 2x here. For this one, I'm going to put a 4x, and for this one, I'm going to put a 9x, because we don't know what those angles are, but we know that they're in a ratio, right? So just as I've talked about in the past, the interior angles must add up to 180, so we do 2x plus 4x plus 9x is equal to 180 degrees. 2x plus 4x gives you 6x, 6x plus 9x gives you 15x's. And then in order to get the x by itself, you have to divide both sides by 15, and you end up with 12. Okay? So that's the value for x. Now remember, the question is asking, find the measurement of R, S, and T. So the last thing we have to do is just plug it back in. So if we do, let me change my color here. The measurement for angle R, the measurement for angle S, the measurement for angle T. We have to find each one of these angle measurements. So for R, it's 2 times x. We said x is 12, so 2 times 12 makes 24 degrees. For S, it's 4x, so 4 times 12 makes 48 degrees. And then the measurement for angle T, it's 9x, so 9 times 12 gives me 108. Those three angles should add up to 180. And if my math serves me properly, those should add up to 180. So your final answer will actually be these values here, the 24, the 48, and the 108. Alright, so moving on to number 9, it says an A-frame picnic shelter at Lewis and Clark Historic Park in Iowa is shown. They want to know what is the value for x, right? So you'll notice it is in the shape of a triangle. The interior angles must add up to 180. So if I do 50 plus 65 over here on the side, this gives me 115. We know that all triangles must add up to 180, so we simply do 180 minus 115. We need to regroup. This becomes a 7, this becomes a 10, this becomes a 5, and this becomes a 6. So the missing value for x is just simply 65 degrees. For number 10, they want to know, do the following numbers make a right triangle? So remember, this is called the converse of the Pythagorean theorem, which means that we need to plug in the a, the b, and the c. And then as long as one side equals the other, then it is a right triangle. If they don't equal each other, then it's not. So remember, the longest side is always the c. So between the 27, the 36, and the 45, this one's my c. These don't matter. I'm going to call this one A, going to call this one B. They don't matter. Okay? So when I plug it in, a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. I plug in what I know. This is 27 squared. This is 36 squared. And then this equals to 45 squared. Now obviously you guys will have access to a calculator. So here I've already done the math. Oops, my apologies. So for this one, I am simply just doing 27 squared, which gives me 729. 27 times 27, 729. This one gives me 1,296. And then this side gives me 2,025. Now when I add these two numbers together, this gives me 2025. This side we said was already 20/25. So as long as both sides equal each other, that gives me a big happy face. And that tells me that it does make a right triangle. So put a yes. The yes is your final answer. Please make sure that you show work as I did. Okay, moving on to number 11. It says Perry wants to build a banister for the staircase in his home. The height of the staircase is 5 feet, and the horizontal distance from the top to the bottom of the staircase is 12 feet. They want to know, what is the length of the banister? Okay, so remember, in my class, I said always circle your right angle, put a line directly across from it. That line is always going to be your C, which is known as your hypotenuse. Okay, these other ones don't matter. We're going to call this one A. We're going to call this one B. They can be used interchangeably. So all they want us to do is use Pythagorean's theorem, as we have been doing. Okay, and then for this one, we're just solving for C. So for A, we have a 5. For B, we have a 12. For C, that is what I'm looking for. So 5 times 5 makes 25. 12 times 12 makes 144. And then if we add these two together, you get 169. The 169 is not my answer because there's no way it could be 169 feet. So please make sure always to get rid of the square, opposite is to do the square root. So when you do this, the square root of 169 will give you 13. And in this case, we're talking about feet for this answer. For number 12, you'll notice that we have a three-dimensional object, also known as a rectangular prism. So for this one, remember, these are going to be the only problems that we are going to use the 3D Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared plus b squared plus c squared is equal to d squared. Okay. The d is the diagonal. So in this case, we are looking for the diagonal. So all we need to do, and as I have instructed in my classes, right? First, I always like to find the height. The height is the distance from the top to the bottom. So over here off to the side, I'm going to put h is equal to 12. Okay. The width is the distance from left to right. So the distance from left to right on this box would be my 20. So I'm going to put W for width, and I'm going to put 20 here. And then last but not least, the L stands for the length, the distance from the front of the box to the back of the box. And in this case, we are looking at 4. So my length is 4. The height, the width, the length can be used interchangeably with whatever letter you want. The only letter that cannot be used is the letter D. So to make my life easy, I'm going to call the height the A, the width the B, and then the length the C. So then I'm going to come back here into my my theorem, and I'm going to plug everything in. So the A is the 12, the B is the 20, the C is my 4, and then once again we are trying to find the diagonal. So this gives me 144, this gives me 400, this gives me 16. I add them all together, and for this one I get 560. 560, there's no way that could be my answer. Don't forget to take the square root at the very end. And when you do that, the diagonal in this case is a 23.7. It's 23.66, but because we are having to round to the nearest 10th place, the number after the 6 is another 6, so that rounds it up to 23.7. So this is your final answer. And we are in the home stretch. So for number 13 on the last page, it says Blake is building a model of a bridge out of wood as shown in the figure. He needs to cut a piece of wood for one of the vertical support beams. What length should he cut? So in other words, he needs to find the distance of the height of that triangle. So easiest way, circle the 90-degree angle, put a line directly across from it or an arrow. This one will always be your C, also known as your hypotenuse. These don't matter. I'm going to call that one my A, this one my B. Once again, we're using Pythagorean's theorem. Because it is a two-dimensional triangle, it's not a rectangular prism like the last one that we just did. So we use a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. My a, we don't know what that is, so I'm just going to put a. You could put x, but sometimes it throws students off, so I'll leave it as a. My b is the 6, and then your c is going to be the 6.5. So in this case, we get 36. Over here on this side, we end up getting, what is this? This gives me 42.25. And then in order to get the a squared by itself, we must subtract 36 from both sides. Subtract 36. So we're left with a squared is equal to a 6.25. Don't forget to take the square root of that, and we end up with a 2.5. If you look at your possible answers over here on the left-hand side, that one is going to be letter C. So that's my answer for number 13. For number 14, this is one of my favorites because I like to graph. I know some of you guys either have a love or hate relationship with graphing. So on coordinate points, I always like to put x and y. You'll notice over here, they've already listed which one's the x and the y axis. So first I locate -1 on the x-axis, that's to the left of the 0, and then up 2. So I go left 1, up 2, so my first point is going to be here. The second point is going to be at 3, -5, so I locate 3 on the x-axis because it's a positive. It's going to be 3 to the right. And then the second number is a -5, which means I'm going to go down 5 after I go to the right 3. So to the right 3, down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Your second point will be down here. To the best of your ability, you are simply going to use your pencil and attach those two. And then from here, you make a right triangle. So you can either make a right triangle going above or below. Me personally, I'd rather make it going below. So I'm going to go down to the right. Boom, there's my right triangle. Always remember that the diagonal will be your hypotenuse. So in this case, that's going to be your C. And then you just count the number of squares. So I'm going to start with the bottom, the base. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then for the height, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're just counting the number of units, which in this case are the squares. So we get a 4, a 7. These don't matter what they are. I'm going to call that one my A. I'm going to call this one my B. And then once again, I'm just using Pythagorean's theorem because it says right here to use Pythagorean's theorem. So again, a squared plus b squared equals to c squared. The a is the 7. The b is the 4, and then the c is what we're trying to find. So in this case, I get 49, I get 16. These add up to give you 65. You take the square root, and once again, your answer in this case becomes an 8.1 because we need to round. For number 15, it says Brian has 3 pieces of string that measure 16, 34, and 30 centimeters. Determine whether the pieces of string can form a right triangle. Explain your reasoning. So remember, they give us the 3 sides. The longest side is always your C. So this is going to be my C. I'm going to call this one A. I'm going to call this one B. I'm going to use Pythagorean's theorem, a squared plus b squared. Oops. Sorry. A squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. So the A we said is my 16. The B we said is the 30, and the longest one will always be your C, which in this case is a 34, right? So then when I do 16 times 16, I get 256. When I do 30 times 30, I get 900. And then 34 times 34 gives me my 1156. So when I add these two together, on the left side, 256 plus 900 gives you 1156. On the right side, I also get 1156. Because they equal each other, that makes me happy. Put a little happy face here. And these do form a right triangle. Okay? Thank you guys for watching the video. Make sure that you guys watch this multiple times to be ready for Friday's test. And other than that, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys after spring break, as I will be gone for the next few days. Thank you for watching.